think it was as simple as burnout finally hitting me. The lucky thing about being at the start of your journey is that no one really cares what you do next. Does the world really need another artist? Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Britt and I'm an illustrator and teeny tiny business owner. It's hard to believe that it's been over a year since I decided to embrace life as a self-employed artist. After being made redundant from my job as a games artist back at the end of 2024, I decided to forgo the security of a full-time job and start my own illustration business instead. While I've continued to take on freelance gigs throughout 2025 to help me pay the bills, I'm incredibly proud of what I've managed to achieve with my art business over the course of a single year. From opening my Etsy store to participating in 8 different art markets and conventions to starting this channel here on YouTube. Despite the huge amount of creative and personal growth I've been able to do this year, as well as all of the excitement that has brought me to do it, I'd be lying if I said it had always been plain sailing. Self-doubt, inexperience, and just downright fatigue are all things that I've been all too familiar with this past year. This past winter, I've been faced with a particularly ferocious bout of burnout, which has been really hard to get over, so much so that it did have me questioning whether I'm cut out to continue being a self-employed artist at all. And that whole process has really had me reflecting on the kind of attitude that it's essential to have just to not quit as an artist during your first year, particularly one who's working for themselves. As I was getting through my most recent bout of burnout, I happened to read the book Art and Fear by David Bales and Ted Orland. I always want to say Ted Bales and David Orland. And it actually really helped me to make sense of a lot of what I was feeling at the time. The book asks some really simple but quite uncomfortable questions, such as how does art get done? Why does it often not get done? And what stops so many people who start? What I really loved about this book was how it made me feel less like there was something wrong with me and more like what I was going through was just something incredibly normal for people who take creative work seriously. The reason why I bring it up is because a lot of what I'm sharing today is shaped by the points that were raised in Art and Fear and what I learned from reading it, but it's also shaped by the experience of how it's felt to live through my first year as a freelance self-employed artist and all of the challenges and joys that have come with that. So allow me to share with you just a handful of the lessons that I have learned that has helped me not to quit during my first year as a self-employed artist. I think that burnout and art block are one of those things that as an artist you kind of push out of your mind until you're actually going through it. I felt very lucky that for most of the year I felt a lot of energy and motivation, and it's been all about growth and trying things for the first time in a very optimistic way. But inevitably, we cannot be motivated and energetic forever. And it's probably no surprise that eventually I did hit a wall. And at the end of the convention season for me last year, I felt just a sudden inertia and kind of hopelessness that I hadn't really felt before. And I think it was as simple as burnout finally hitting me. I definitely struggle with that issue of feeling really empty after I achieve a goal, specifically after MCM Comic Con, which was a convention that I'd been working towards and grinding towards for the latter half of the year and was very proud to have managed to pull off, I guess, in my first year of doing conventions. It was like as soon as I had pulled off the convention, that serotonin just immediately dropped and I felt really low. It's something that I'd dealt with earlier in the year to like a lesser extent, was that kind of come down after a market or an event that I'd been working up to for a long time. But I think this one was just a much bigger impact, probably because I knew it was my last event of the year and because it was my biggest event of the year. It all kind of just compounded into this really empty feeling once I'd finished it. Your energy doesn't dissipate immediately once you finish a project. Your energy kind of lingers around a bit and you're actually really tired, but you have this kind of false energy that's still in you, which makes it very hard to just relax and do nothing after you've been putting your all into a project. And that's definitely how I kind of felt after MCM. And I think that can explain the tendency that I and probably a lot of people have, is to kind of deny the fact that we might be burned out or that we might need to take a break. Whether or not a burnout is physical or mental, it is an issue that it's going to take patience and time to recover from. It's not going to be just this easy, quick fix, which so many of us wish it was. I just try to remind myself that actually sometimes it is just this hard. And this is just a natural part of the process. And it is most importantly a temporary part of the process. And the sooner that you can make peace with that, the sooner that you can actually start to heal. I think that kind of way of thinking is really important. It is the acceptance that you are burned out, but the knowledge that you will get better again. I was very much a believer, I guess, that shaking things up was a good way to get myself out of an artistic rut. And I fully believed months ago that that would be one of the tips on this list when it came to a video about art block or burnout. It would be try something completely new and out of your comfort zone. But the thing is, I think for me, in times of kind of artistic stress or fatigue, comfort zones are important. As I said, when the convention season ended at the end of last year, I just kind of hit this creative wall. It was like I was faced with a new blank slate, and I had all of this displaced energy and now kind of had nowhere to go. I think because of this energy, I felt like instead of taking a proper break, it would be the best idea to just find a new place to put it. And so I took on a whole new project in a whole new medium. What that project was specifically is actually kind of something I'd want to talk more on in a different video, because it's a whole different avenue to what I normally do with my art. But in short, I'll say I wanted to learn to code. I was trying to learn to make games, which is still a passion of mine, still something I want to do. But I think directly coming off of the back of something like MCM weekend and just all the prep that I'd been putting into doing IRL selling of my art at events throughout last year, it was kind of a big undertaking. What I really needed was time to recollect before delving into something new. For me, being productive is always a positive, so I thought it was a good thing to just throw myself into a new task. Instead of reinvigorating me like I hoped it would, I quickly found myself kind of overwhelmed by the fact that my day was taken up with completely unfamiliar tasks and all of this new learning when I was still deep down pretty tired from the year that I'd had. I actually ended up even falling behind on some of the things that I'd never had trouble with earlier in the year. I think around this time was the first time that my Etsy orders started to get on top of me, and I was shipping some things even a day or two late. My social media schedule, whatever sort of schedule I had managed to have, was kind of falling by the wayside against my best wishes, which was actually to make more social media content now that the convention season was over for me. There just wasn't a lot of art making in general happening for me, which usually is something I like to do during my downtime, but during this period I just wasn't drawing or painting or creating that much at all. So when I happened to read this simple kind of paragraph in Art and Fear, it like immediately spoke to me and made me realize that I'd been going about things all wrong.
As a practical matter, ideas and methods that work usually continue to work. If you were working smoothly and now you are stuck, chances are you unnecessarily altered some approach that was already working perfectly well. When things go haywire, your best opening strategy might be to return, very carefully and consciously, to the habits and practices in play the last time you felt good about the work.
What I ended up doing after reading this part of the book was actually just stripping everything back down to basics. I went back to making to-do lists that included my most important tasks and not a lot more, just so that it meant I at least would have my bases covered on a day-to-day, and I could rest knowing that my Etsy orders were out, or I'd prepared a couple of social media posts for that week, and I was kind of managing to keep the cogs moving of my core business. I think specifically when you are like turning your art into a business, that element is really important. It can be good to relax into habit and allow yourself to simplify things and just develop habits that makes it easier to keep your creativity slowly chugging along, even if you're not doing anything new. I think when it does become time that you want to experiment and try something different, there is a way to go about it that doesn't feed back into your burnout. You know, that idea of kind of when you're going through a time in your life where you want to feel more in control, you should start by making your bed. I think it's a very similar idea. You have to kind of take things a small step at a time, and it's actually those small steps that build the solid foundation with which you can make like bigger leaps, I suppose. So instead of having these huge goals every week, it might just be one drawing, one social media post before I'm trying to take on the world. I do think sometimes art is about making big leaps, but a lot of the time it is literally just putting one foot in front of the other, and that is how you build something long lasting, and that is how you keep things going in the long run. I don't think I wanted to reduce the intensity of the way I was working because I was scared that reducing that intensity would mean that my artistic side and my business and the control and agency that I have gained over my life in the past year would be at risk. A lot of that throwing myself into a new project was fear based. I still, even now, have to constantly remind myself that moving slowly isn't stopping, and that taking a minute to think before you act isn't stopping, and that you don't need to constantly feel the need to be diving into the next thing to like keep your artistic side alive. Goal setting in general has been a hugely motivating thing for me. I love my to-do lists, I love my deadlines, and I do love being ambitious as well. But there is a limit to that. And there are definitely times along the way where I think my own ambitious mindset has become a hindrance to my actual progress. There's an anecdote in Art and Fear that really outlines what I'm talking about quite well.
Expectations drift into fantasies all too easily. At a recent writers' workshop, the instructor laboured heroically to keep the discussion centred upon issues of craft, as yet unlearned, while the writers, as yet unpublished, laboured equally to divert the focus with questions about royalties, movie rights, and sequels. Given a small kernel of reality and any measure of optimism, nebulous expectations whisper to you that the work will soar, that it will become easy, that it will make itself. Unfortunately, expectations based on illusion lead almost always to disillusionment.
This book really came for me with that part. I felt kind of personally called out by this anecdote. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, yeah, I'm so guilty of doing this. I just can't help but think of every new skill I learn as a potential new venture and imagine like 10 steps down the line of where it might get me or what I might make from it. Experimentation for experimentation's sake is something I'm not very good at. I'm working on it, but one minute I'm thinking, oh, like it would be really fun to make something out of clay. Maybe I'll try clay art, you know, and it starts off with me saving a few things on Pinterest, and I go down to the art store and I buy some clay. But then before you know it, I've like not even finished one wonky fridge magnet before I'm wondering how I'm going to handle doing all the handmade orders, or how I'm going to fit a kiln into my flat or something ridiculous like that. And then I'm comparing myself to people that are 10 years down the line working with clay and wondering why my art doesn't look anything like theirs yet, and yada yada yada. So needless to say, I'll end up with a cupboard actually that is over there in my living room, full of clay supplies and air dry clay that have been untouched because I basically just thought myself out of doing anything. Constantly worrying about how the next thing that I make is going to affect my brand or how I'm going to make it profitable isn't really helpful or healthy. I'm at the very start of my journey, and one of the things I always try to appreciate is that the lucky thing about being at the start of your journey is that no one really cares what you do next. The stakes are actually really low. And just try something out and see what happens, and being comfortable with that is something that I'm constantly trying to do. Because if I'd been less worried about the potential pitfalls of becoming a successful clay artist who's selling my clay artwork, then I might have actually just made some interesting clay art. But instead, I basically just psyched myself out of making anything at all. It's very helpful to try and keep yourself open and loose, as opposed to always needing to be 10 steps ahead of yourself. And I'll be honest, I think this is still one of the hardest ones for me. Like, keeping my own expectations in check is something I am constantly trying to do. I think that the previous tip that I gave is a good example of this, but I'd say that focusing on the outcomes of our artistic efforts as opposed to the process of them is definitely something that a lot of artists are guilty of, and I am no exception to that. While it's completely understandable that artists would consider the outcomes important, I do think that in a day and age where outcomes can just be developed in a flash, process is actually more important than ever, not just to us, but to our audiences that we're sharing to. Charlie actually sent me an article, probably because he knows I've been writing this video and just in general thinking about all of this type of thing. But it's about how more people are embracing friction, especially when it comes to making art, kind of as a reaction to AI. And we're seeing more examples of behind the scenes of practical effects being used to make things and the process that goes into creating art, because some of that is getting like a bit lost in the source at the moment with people just being able to instantly generate images. I think there's going to be and is a new appreciation for putting in the work to making art. And I think that's something that we should all, I guess, appreciate as well as artists. And focusing on process has actually also been really helpful, I think, when it comes to social media. For me, I think it's easy for me to look at other people's, Instagrams or their social media presence and the amazing art that they're posting and feel kind of self-conscious about my own art. But I think that there will always be an appreciation for wherever you are at in your art journey on social media, because people can see themselves reflected in you. For example, like that's one of the reasons that I share on YouTube at all, even though in many ways I don't feel qualified to be on here, giving advice or being an example of how to run a small art business or how to be a freelance artist or anything like that. I feel like every stage of the process of being an artist is unique and interesting and worth sharing. And I think being able to see people at all stages of their process is something that's valuable. I would say as well, like YouTube has been a real lifeline for me in order to give myself goals that don't necessarily revolve around creating a final outcome. Like, arguably, a video is a final outcome, but the videos themselves are more focused around sharing my experiences, and it's about finding ways to communicate. And I think introducing that into my schedule and into my life as an artist has been really beneficial for me. When you're going through burnout, when you're mentally fatigued, you're naturally harder on yourself. You'll say things to yourself like your art's not good enough, or maybe that all of the things you've been working towards have been futile, or that you haven't improved enough, or you're not certain on who you are yet as an artist. That's another big one for me. But it has been comforting to remind myself that ultimately, no, I'm not certain on who I am yet as an artist, but I will probably never be. And I think it's probably a myth that those people that we look up to and admire that are more experienced than us, or that have been developing their businesses or their art styles longer than us, really feel like they're done either. I think we are all just on at different stages along a path, and we're constantly evolving and growing. And that's actually kind of what's exciting about being an artist as well. We don't really stagnate, we continue to change. Like, I'm not going to wake up and one day and just be like done and just be complete. And if I did, like, imagine how not fine I'd be after that. That would be like the biggest come down ever. I'd probably that's just like eternal art block, and who wants that? It's also reminded me that I do want to start sharing a bit more on this channel about the actual art making process and more like art focused videos as opposed to just business focused videos, because I think one of the reasons that I haven't been doing that is because I've been self-conscious about my process, about where I'm at with my art. And I think it is just quite like a self-conscious thing to do, to kind of let someone look behind the curtain of how you make your art and how you draw and paint. But I think I need to just value my process more, and I think that kind of finding ways to share it here on YouTube would be a good way of doing that. And also just the reminder that even if I'm not the artist that I want to be yet, the things that I'm doing are still worth sharing. A lot of us, or at least I, can feel some futility about art making. I mean, especially in a world rife with problems and turmoil, you can start to wonder whether or not what you're doing is really important or necessary, or am I bringing something that hasn't been done before? Am I bringing something that people really want? Am I enriching people's lives the way that I would like to? Does the world really need another artist? There is a passage in Art and Fear that I felt like was maybe the most meaningful to me, actually. I think it really cements this idea, and I'll just read it to you now.
Despite its richness and variability, the well-defined world we inherit doesn't quite fit each one of us individually. Most of us spend most of our time in other people's worlds, working at predetermined jobs, relaxing to prepackaged entertainment, and no matter how benign this ready-made world may be, there will always be times when something is missing or doesn't quite ring true. And so you make your place in the world by making part of it, by contributing some new part to the set. And surely one of the more astonishing rewards of art making comes when people make time to visit the world you have created. Some, indeed, may even purchase a piece of your world to carry back and adopt as their own. Each new piece of your art enlarges our reality. The world is not yet done.
I definitely just felt that reignition of passion when I read this part of the book. It reminded me why I really love art and putting things out into the world. As an artist, passion is just this part of the process which is, it's difficult to lose completely. I think it's difficult for us to keep going without it at all. Mindsets like the one expressed there in Art and Fear really help to build my confidence in thinking, I can make art that is worth making. Just moving forward one step at a time is going to help me to do that. Like they say, the world is not done yet. There's always another painting to add to the cave wall. It's all about kind of remembering why I started and letting my heart lead me towards the projects that are really important to me. And knowing that, the mundane parts of the job that we kind of talked about earlier, they're all still leading you towards making those things that are really worth making. And even if you're not at the stage yet where you're making your dream project or your dream projects, you are getting yourself there by practicing, by learning, by being able to sustain yourself. It's okay that it's not happening overnight. You are still able to contribute, and the art that you're making now is still contributing to the world. Reframing the things that I achieved last year, any followers or subscribers that I gained, any art that I sold at markets or conventions, like all of those things are achievements on their own, but not because they're like things checked off a list or some kind of status symbol to where I'm at as an artist. They're kind of important because they're evidence of the impact that my art has had on the world around me. I think as artists, it's one of the healthiest things, or one of the healthier things that we can be motivated by is, how has my art impacted someone? As opposed to always just thinking about it as how good of an artist am I? There's another quote actually in Art and Fear which says, the only work really worth doing, the only work you can do convincingly is the work that focuses on the things you care about. And I do think that that is a very important thing. Sometimes you're going to be making art that you're not the most passionate about, but I think for somebody with the soul of an artist, remembering this as kind of the crux of what you're doing is quite important to stay sane. Like, something being a means to an end is fine, but I think keeping in mind the spark that inspired you in the first place is really grounding. Take me doing Artist Alley, for example. Of course, a big reason for me doing that was to diversify my income and bring some money in so that I could just keep myself going as an art business and, I guess, human in this world. But I focused on making art that I would have wanted to buy as somebody who frequented those spaces a lot in my youth. I vividly remember being motivated by making pieces that I didn't see that often, but I would have been very happy to find at Artist Alley. So in that way, I was still doing it out of a love for the thing itself. Also with YouTube, it's not like the idea of eventually being able to monetize my videos isn't appealing to me as somebody who is a self-employed artist. but I also love watching YouTube videos, and I felt like I could offer content which was interesting to other people like me. And that's one of the reasons why I'm still posting videos where a lot of people might have petered off by now. The projects that you care about the most are usually going to be the best, and they are almost always going to be the ones that you see through to the end. And I think a lot of the time that's what this all is all about. It's just being able to continue seeing art through to the end. Aside from that, I just really feel like this is something that I am born to do. I've shown myself time and time again that I will prevail even when my mind is against me, even when the odds are against me. I know failure isn't an option. I can evolve, but I won't fail. I'll just keep climbing that hill. Like the world, I too am not done. So there you have it, just a few of the lessons that I had to learn to keep myself sane during my first year as a self-employed artist. To anyone else watching this that might be going through it at the start of their business journey, at the start of their artist journey, I hope there might have been a nugget of wisdom in this video that can help you, and at least to know that you are not alone in your struggles. Of course, this video relies heavily on my own experience, and I know that a lot of the people that watch my videos are also artists or small business owners. So if you have any advice or observations of your own, having gone through your own journeys, if there's anything that you would disagree with that I said, if there's anything that you would add, it would be really, really great to hear it. I was also thinking about maybe doing a kind of more general tips video about my first year of running my own business and doing artist alleys and conventions, just with more practical advice in it. So if that's something that people would be interested in, then please let me know in the comments as well. Also, happy Valentine's Day and happy Lunar New Year. Just like shameless plug, I have like a little Lunar New Year themed print behind me that I will be adding to my store later this week. I would love to have done some more Valentine's themed designs. I have been doing some Valentine's themed like drawings and paintings, but it's just way too close to Valentine's Day to offer them as actual cards or anything. But I guess if I do them now, then I can offer them next year. So that's that mindset coming into it again, just got to keep going, can't beat ourselves up too much. Anyway, going off on a tangent. If you have made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. And if you like the video, I would love it if you liked the video. I share videos every month, more or less, about my experience as a self-employed artist, and also vlogs of my experiences at art conventions and artist alleys. So if that seems like your kind of thing, then feel free to subscribe. Otherwise, for now, I will see you next time. Bye!